When Leonardo Ferraz, heir to a billion-dollar empire, disappears without a trace, investigative journalist Clara Duarte sees the chance of a lifetime to unravel the mystery. But what she doesn't know is that this search will lead her into a dangerous world, full of betrayals and dark secrets, where her own life will be at risk. Subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. We want to know your opinion on this intriguing case, and if you believe there's something more behind this disappearance. The mansion in Beverly Hills rose like a crystal tower amidst the darkness of the night, its facade illuminated by the lights of dozens of expensive cars parked around it. Inside, luxury seemed to overflow from every corner. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, classical music filled the air with soft and elegant notes, and the impeccably dressed guests danced to the rhythm of the orchestra, immersed in a world of glamour and ostentation. Clara Duarte, however, felt uncomfortable in that environment. Her presence there was not out of pleasure, but out of duty. The opportunity to investigate the disappearance of Leonardo Ferraz, heir to one of the country's largest fortunes, could not be wasted. Her eyes, sharp and analytical, scanned each face, each gesture, looking for a sign. Something wasn't right, and she knew this could be the moment that would change her career forever. Leonardo's disappearance didn't seem like a simple twist of fate. A man so intelligent, so calculating, and above all, so rich, didn't just vanish without leaving any trace. It was more than that. Clara felt there was a hidden truth behind it all, something dark that the powerful wanted to keep buried. In her striking red dress, she approached the table where Mariana Ferraz, the mother of the missing man, was sitting alone, watching the others with a distant look in her eyes. Clara knew that this woman, cold and impeccable, was the key to the investigation. Mariana, despite her impassive appearance, had the eyes of someone who had witnessed something she would rather forget. Clara gathered her courage and approached the table. "Good evening, Mrs. Ferraz," she began, trying to mask her nervousness. "I'm sorry for what's happening with your son." Mariana raised her eyes, studying Clara with a calculating look. "You're Clara Duarte, aren't you? The journalist. I hope you're not expecting a show of grief. The losses we've faced are personal." The tension between them was palpable. Clara tried to maintain a professional posture, but a sense of unease enveloped her. Mariana didn't seem shaken, but rather distant, as though she was holding something, or someone, back. "I understand that this is a difficult situation," Clara replied softly, yet firmly. "But the question that intrigues me is, why did your son disappear? What really happened to him?" Mariana's gaze darkened, but she didn't respond immediately. She only gave a brief, enigmatic smile. "You're trying to understand something you perhaps shouldn't," she said in a low voice, almost a whisper. "There are things better left unknown." Clara felt the impact of her words, as though she were touching an invisible wall of power. The woman before her knew more than she was letting on, but her attitude suggested that she had everything under control. With a swift motion, Mariana stood up, leaving Clara with more questions than answers. She glanced around the crowd and noticed a tall man in a black suit staring at her intently. His gaze was piercing, as if he were reading her soul. Carlos Ferraz, Leonardo's uncle, approached her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're very interested in my nephew, aren't you, Clara?" he said, his voice laden with a threatening calmness. "But be careful. Some truths are more dangerous than you think." Clara met his gaze without hesitation. "I just want to know what happened to him. The truth always comes to light, Carlos." He let out a soft laugh, almost imperceptible. "Truth is a luxury few can afford, dear. Don't risk your neck trying to reach it." Before Clara could respond, he walked away, leaving her even more disturbed. Something in his posture, that cold smile, told her that the danger was closer than she had imagined. She looked toward the door, where the nightlight fell softly, and felt a presence. Carlos's words echoed in her mind. There was something more, something deep and dark behind Leonardo's disappearance. But what was it? And more importantly, how far was she willing to go to uncover the truth? With her heart racing, Clara knew the night was just beginning. What she had uncovered so far was just a glimpse of a much larger and far more dangerous mystery. The city of Los Angeles spread out like a maze of lights beneath Clara Duarte as she stood at the balcony of her small apartment sipping her coffee. The previous night's events kept playing in her mind like a vivid movie. Mariana Ferraz's cryptic words, Carlos Ferraz's chilling warning. Nothing about the evening seemed normal, and she knew deep in her gut that the story she was chasing had layers too complex to unravel easily. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. She hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to open it. She had already received several threats warning her to stay away from the Faraz family, but the intrigue was too strong. She clicked the message. "You're getting too close, Clara. Stop before it's too late." The message was short, but it sent a shiver down her spine. Whoever it was knew she was digging into something dangerous. They also knew her name. The realization that the walls were closing in on her hit her with a wave of urgency. Yet, it also fueled her resolve. There was no turning back now. The next day, Clara found herself back in the heart of the Faraz family empire. This time, not at a lavish ball, but inside one of the family's corporate offices. The building, with its sleek, modern architecture, towered over the city. Inside, the air was cool and sterile, and the sharp scent of polished wood and glass filled the space. Clara could feel the weight of power in every step she took as she walked down the long corridors toward the office of Raoul Faraz, the eldest son and next in line to inherit the empire. Raoul Faraz was everything his father wanted him to be: ruthless, strategic, and impossibly charming when it served his purpose. He was the public face of the Faraz. Fortune, the one who appeared on magazine covers, hosted gala events, and spoke about the future of his family's wealth with a calculated smile. But Clara had already heard whispers that he wasn't the golden boy he pretended to be. She was led into his office by a secretary, her steps echoing in the otherwise quiet building. When the door opened, Clara was struck by the contrast between the modern, minimalist decor and the sense of cold calculation that seemed to hang in the air. Raoul was standing by the window looking out over the sprawling city, his back turned to her. "Ms. Duarte," he said, his voice smooth, almost too smooth. He turned to face her, his piercing blue eyes meeting hers with an intensity that felt like a challenge. "I've been expecting you." Clara didn't flinch, though she could feel the tension rise. She knew that being here wasn't going to be easy. Raoul was not someone who gave answers freely. He was used to controlling the narrative, manipulating events in his favor. "I don't need to remind you that your family is in the spotlight, Mr. Faraz," Clara said, her tone firm. "The disappearance of your cousin Leonardo is a story that won't go away. People want answers." Raoul took a slow, deliberate step toward her, the light from the window casting shadows across his sharp features. "I understand your curiosity, Ms. Duarte," he said, his lips curling into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "But sometimes, not everything that happens is meant to be revealed. Some things are better left in the past." Clara raised an eyebrow. "But you don't expect me to just ignore it, do you?" Raoul's smile faded slightly. "You have no idea what you're getting into, Clara. There are forces at play here that you'll never fully understand. And believe me, some of those forces are far more dangerous than you think." The air in the room seemed to grow heavier as he spoke, his words lingering like a warning. Clara stood her ground, meeting his gaze with unflinching resolve. "I'm just looking for the truth," she said, her voice low but resolute, "and I won't stop until I find it." Raoul studied her for a moment, his face unreadable. Then, with a sharp motion, he turned back to the window, his back once again to her. "Truth," he muttered, almost to himself. "The truth is a luxury few can afford, Mrs. Duarte. Be careful what you wish for." Clara knew then that Raoul Faraz wasn't just a businessman. He was a man with a hidden agenda, someone who would go to great lengths to protect his family's secrets. But what was he hiding? And more importantly, why was it worth risking everything to keep it buried? Leaving the office, Clara felt a growing sense of unease. Raoul's words haunted her. There was something dangerous about the Faraz family, a darkness lurking just beneath the surface. But she wasn't the type to back down from a challenge. If anything, her curiosity had only grown stronger. Back at her apartment that evening, Clara sat down, at her desk, going over the notes she had gathered so far. The pieces didn't quite fit together yet, but she could sense a pattern, one that led back to a single question. Why had Leonardo Faraz disappeared, and what was he running from? Her phone buzzed again. This time it was an email. It was from an anonymous account. The subject line simple: "Meet me tonight." Clara's heart raced as she opened the message. The email contained only a time, a location, and a brief note. "If you want answers, you'll find them here." A chill ran down her spine. This was it, the next step in her investigation. Whoever had sent this email had information, and they were offering it to her. But why? And at what cost? Without hesitation, Clara grabbed her jacket and headed out into the night. She didn't know what awaited her, but one thing was certain: she was in too deep to turn back now. Clara's heart raced as she navigated the dimly lit streets of Los Angeles. The email had been vague, the instructions cryptic, but there was no turning back now. Whoever had reached out to her was offering a lead, a thread to pull that might unravel the entire mystery of Leonardo Ferraz's disappearance. But was it a trap? The risk of walking into danger was high, yet Clara's resolve had never been stronger. There was something in her that thrived in the face of danger, a part of her that couldn't resist the pull of an untold story. She arrived at the address, a nondescript building tucked away in a quieter part of the city. The area felt oddly empty, with only a few dim streetlights casting shadows across the cracked sidewalks. Clara hesitated for a moment, staring at the unmarked door before her. It was so ordinary, so plain, yet everything inside her screamed that something extraordinary, even sinister, lay behind it. With a steady breath, she pushed the door open. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of old leather and dust. Clara stepped into a small, stark lobby where a single security guard sat behind a desk watching a television. His eyes flicked up as she entered, but he didn't move. Clara glanced at a sign next to the elevator. The building had offices for rent, but the lower floors were mostly abandoned. She felt the weight of her decision settling in her chest as she pressed the button for the top floor. The elevator creaked as it ascended, its metallic groans reverberating through the empty shaft. Clara's fingers brushed against her phone in her pocket. She checked the time, 9:45 p.m. The message had been clear: meet me on the rooftop at 10 p.m. The elevator stopped with a jolt, the doors sliding open to reveal a narrow hallway leading to an exit door that opened onto the rooftop. Clara stepped out and immediately felt the change in the air. The city skyline stretched before her, an endless sea of lights, but the rooftop was eerily quiet. No one was around, just the hum of the city below. "You're here," a voice broke the silence. Clara's pulse quickened. A figure emerged from the shadows at the far end of the rooftop, tall and cloaked in darkness. The man moved with an unsettling calm, his face obscured by the shadows, but his presence was unmistakable. The mysterious informant. "Who are you?" Clara demanded, trying to steady her nerves. The man didn't answer immediately. He stepped closer, and the faint glow of a distant streetlight revealed his features: a sharp jawline, disheveled dark hair, and eyes that seemed to pierce through her. He was younger than she had expected, no older than 30. His clothes were simple, almost too plain for someone who had arranged such a cryptic meeting. "I'm the one who can give you the answers you seek," he said, his voice low and measured. "But first, you need to understand something important. This goes beyond Leonardo. It's about the Ferraz family, and everything they've been hiding for years." Clara stood frozen for a moment. The Ferraz family. What could this man possibly know that she didn't? Her instincts screamed to run, but she couldn't. She had come too far to back out now. She had to know what he knew. "Why should I trust you?" Clara asked, taking a cautious step forward. "How do I know you're not just trying to mislead me?" The man chuckled, a hollow sound that didn't reach his eyes. "You don't, but if you want to know the truth, if you really want to uncover what happened to Leonardo, you have no choice but to listen." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small flash drive, holding it out toward her. Clara took it with a trembling hand, her mind racing. This could be it, the key to everything. But what was on it? "What's this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Everything you need," the man replied, his gaze intense. "But be warned, once you have this, there's no turning back. The Ferraz family will stop at nothing to protect their secrets. You'll be a target." Clara hesitated. She had faced danger before, but this was different. She wasn't just investigating a missing person. She was delving into the darkest corners of power, into a world where the truth could cost her everything. "Why are you helping me?" she finally asked, her eyes narrowing. The man's lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Let's just say I have my reasons, but remember this. There's no such thing as a free favor in this world. There's always a price." Before Clara could ask any more questions, the man turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness like a ghost. Clara stood on the rooftop, the flash drive cold in her palm. Her head was spinning with questions, but one thing was clear: this was only the beginning. Back at her apartment, Clara sat in front of her laptop, staring at the flash drive. The weight of the decision before her pressed down on her chest. She plugged it into the computer, her fingers trembling as the file appeared on the screen. It was a series of documents, photos, and videos, every piece a puzzle, each more disturbing than the last. There were photos of Leonardo Ferraz at various events, but they weren't the kind of glamorous images one would expect from the heir to a fortune. In some of them, his face was bruised and battered. In others, he was seen arguing with a man who looked eerily familiar, Raul Ferraz. The documents detailed financial transactions, secret accounts, and a list of names Clara hadn't expected to see: influential politicians, businessmen, and even law enforcement officers. It seemed that Leonardo had been trying to expose the family's darkest secrets long before he disappeared. As Clara scrolled through the files, one name kept appearing over and over: Victor Marquez. He was listed as a close associate of the Ferraz family, someone with a history of shady dealings. Clara didn't recognize the name, but the man's face was unmistakable. It was the same man who had been watching her at the Ferraz estate the night before. Her thoughts raced. What was his connection to all of this? Was he the one behind Leonardo's disappearance? Or was he just another player in the dangerous game of power and wealth? The more Clara dug, the more she realized she was treading into territory she wasn't prepared for. The Ferraz family had built their empire on lies, deceit, and manipulation, and anyone who tried to expose them was swiftly erased. But she couldn't stop now, not when the truth was so close. Clara sat in the dim glow of her apartment's desk lamp, eyes locked on the screen. The flash drive had opened doors she hadn't expected to find, but every answer she uncovered seemed to lead her deeper into the web of secrets surrounding the Ferraz family. There were enough damning files to bring down their empire, yet Clara knew the risks. Every piece of information felt like a threat, and the more she unearthed, the more she realized how powerful and dangerous these people were. She leaned back in her chair, rubbing her eyes. The hours had slipped by unnoticed. The weight of the investigation was starting to take its toll, gnawing at her focus. But there was no turning back now. The pieces were beginning to fit together, and they pointed to something far darker than she had ever imagined. Leonardo's disappearance was just the tip of the iceberg. There were whispers of a cover-up, a hidden agenda that involved not just the Ferraz family, but a network of powerful people across the city. One name kept coming up in the files: Victor Marquez. He wasn't just a business associate of the Ferraz family. He was someone with deep ties to the criminal underworld, a man with connections to corrupt politicians, shady businessmen, and even law enforcement officers. Clara could feel a chill creep over her as she scrolled through the documents detailing his influence. It wasn't just about money. It was about control of everything that moved in this city. She couldn't stop now. There was too much at stake. But Clara knew that the closer she got to the truth, the more danger she was in. Whoever had warned her to stay away from the Ferraz family wasn't just trying to intimidate her. They were trying to protect something that could tear apart everything they had built. She could feel it in her bones. Clara had no way of knowing who was watching her, who was tracking her every move. She had always been careful, always aware of the risks that came with her job. But this time felt different. The stakes were higher, and the game she was playing had no rules. The following day, Clara met with her trusted source, Rafael, a former police detective who had worked on several high-profile cases before retiring in disgrace. He was the one who had first suggested she look into the Ferraz family. Despite his tarnished reputation, Rafael was someone Clara trusted, someone who knew the city's underbelly better than most. They met at a cafe on the outskirts of downtown, far from the Ferraz family's watchful eyes. The quiet hum of conversation and the clink of coffee cups filled the space, but Clara could feel the tension in the air as Rafael slid into the booth across from her. "Found something interesting?" he asked, his eyes scanning the street through the window. Clara nodded, pushing a folder across the table toward him. Rafael's eyes flicked to the documents, his fingers skimming over the pages quickly before he met her gaze again. "Victor Marquez," he muttered. "I knew there was something off about him. This man isn't just a businessman. He's a kingmaker, and not the kind you want to cross." Clara leaned in, lowering her voice. "What do you know about him?" Rafael's gaze hardened. "He's got his hands in everything: drugs, arms, and even human trafficking. The Ferraz family's fortune didn't just come from legitimate business deals. Marquez is the one pulling the strings, funding their ventures, laundering money, and keeping them out of the spotlight when things go south." Clara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. It was worse than she had thought. The Ferraz empire wasn't just built on wealth. It was built on corruption, deceit, and a network of criminals who had their claws deeply embedded in the city's political and economic systems. But why would Leonardo want to expose them? He could have had everything: a life of luxury, power, all at his fingertips. Why would he risk it all? Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Raphael's face grew somber. Leonardo wasn't like the others. He wasn't just interested in power or wealth. He wanted to make things right, but he quickly realized he was swimming in deep, dangerous waters. The family doesn't just protect their fortune, they'll protect their secrets no matter the cost. Clara swallowed hard, the weight of the truth settling on her chest like a stone. She had already suspected that Leonardo's disappearance wasn't an accident, but now she was sure of it. He had gotten too close to something worth more than his life to the Faraz family. As Clara left the cafe, her mind raced. The pieces were falling into place, but they painted a terrifying picture. Marquez was the key, but she couldn't understand why he would involve someone as young as Leonardo in his web. Was it possible that Leonardo had tried to betray the family? Had he known too much? Her phone buzzed again, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from an unknown number, one that had haunted her over the past few days. I know what you're doing. Clara, you won't stop until you've uncovered everything. But remember, there's a price to pay for the truth. Are you willing to pay it? Her stomach dropped as she stared at the message. Was this a warning, or was it another threat to scare her into backing off? Clara didn't have time to figure it out. She had to act fast. The deeper she went, the closer she got to the truth, and the closer she was to becoming a target herself. That night, Clara received another cryptic email. The subject was simple: meet me at the old warehouse. Midnight. Clara didn't hesitate. She knew this was her chance to get closer to the heart of the Faraz family's secrets. Whoever had sent the email had information that could break the case wide open. But as she drove through the empty streets, a sense of dread settled over her. The city felt like a trap, every corner hiding something dangerous. Clara's hands gripped the steering wheel as she navigated the winding roads leading to the abandoned warehouse. The headlights of her car cut through the fog, casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every car that passed seemed like a potential threat, every shadow a hidden danger. Her mind was a whirl of conflicting thoughts. Should she really be doing this? The message had been too cryptic, the risks too great, but Clara was beyond fear now. She had uncovered too much. The truth was out there, and it was waiting for her. The Faraz family, Victor Marquez, the cover-ups, the lies. She couldn't stop now, not when the answers were so close. As the warehouse loomed into view, Clara parked a few yards away, making sure her car wasn't too conspicuous. She knew better than to take risks. Her instincts had kept her alive in the dangerous world of investigative journalism. There was no way she was walking into a trap without at least some precautions. The place was silent, save for the occasional creaking of metal in the wind. The warehouse stood as a relic of a time when industrial giants ruled the city, now left to decay. Clara pulled her coat tighter around her, steeling herself as she stepped out of the car. Her heels clicked against the pavement, a sharp sound that seemed to echo into the emptiness. She paused for a moment, scanning her surroundings. Nothing. No one. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that the very air was charged with tension. Clara approached the massive metal door of the warehouse, her breath visible in the cold night air. She reached out to push it open, but before she could, the door creaked on its own. A figure emerged from the darkness beyond. "You're late," the voice said, low and gravelly. Clara's heart skipped a beat. The figure was tall, draped in shadow, but there was no mistaking the voice. It was Victor Marquez. "I could say the same about you," Clara replied, her tone sharp. She'd been warned about Marquez. His reputation preceded him, but standing here, facing him, the stories she had heard about his ruthless ambition and dangerous connections felt all too real. Marquez stepped into the light, his features now clear. His dark eyes glinted with something dangerous. He was dressed in a tailored suit, though it was odd to see such elegance in a place like this. He exuded power, as if he were someone who didn't belong in the shadows, but ruled over them. "I had to make sure you weren't followed," he said, his voice now soft but carrying an edge that sent a chill down Clara's spine. Clara didn't move, keeping her distance. "Why am I here, Marquez? What do you want from me?" Marquez smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He walked closer, his every movement precise, controlled. "I think you know why. You're close to uncovering something you shouldn't, something that could bring everything crashing down. But you don't understand the price, do you?" Clara's pulse quickened. She had been warned. She had seen the threads of danger tightening around her. But still, she stood her ground. "If you think I'm here to back off, you're wrong. I'm not afraid of you." Victor's smile faded, replaced by a cold look. "You should be," he said, his voice now a low growl. "You think you're some hero uncovering the truth? The truth is you have no idea what you're dealing with. The Faraz family's empire didn't grow by playing by the rules. It grew by breaking them. And if you keep digging, you'll find yourself buried under all the lies we've built." Clara's mind raced, but she couldn't let him see that. She had to remain focused. "Why do you care if I find out the truth? If you're as untouchable as you say you are, then what's the harm?" Victor took a step closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You think we're untouchable? You think the Faraz family is invincible? Let me make one thing clear. No one is untouchable, not even you. We all have our price, Clara. Everyone does." Clara's throat went dry. She had heard enough. This was what she had been looking for, the crack in the empire. But it wasn't just the family that was dangerous. It was everything they controlled, the people who pulled the strings from the shadows. And now, she was in the middle of it all. "You can't stop me, Marquez," she said, her voice firm, though inside she wasn't so sure. "I'll expose you all, one way or another." Victor's eyes darkened. "I don't think you understand, Clara. It's already too late for you. The Faraz family doesn't tolerate mistakes, and you're about to make one that will cost you everything." Clara swallowed hard. Was it too late? Was she already in too deep? Marquez seemed to sense her hesitation. He took a final step forward, his voice low and menacing. "I think you'll find the truth is a lot harder to swallow than you think. The price of uncovering the truth. It's something no one is ever truly prepared for." Clara stood still, refusing to show fear, but inside, doubt began to creep in. Was she ready to pay the price? What would it cost her? Her career? Her life? "Don't underestimate me," Clara said, forcing herself to sound confident. She had come too far to back down now. "I'll uncover everything." Victor's gaze lingered on her for a moment longer, his expression unreadable. Then, without another word, he turned and disappeared back into the darkness of the warehouse. Clara stood there for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. The chill of the night air seemed to seep into her bones. She couldn't help but feel as if the walls were closing in around her. She had been warned, and now there was no going back. The Faraz family and Victor Marquez were playing a game far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. But Clara wasn't about to stop now. She had one goal in mind: uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Clara hadn't slept a wink since her meeting with Victor Marquez. The weight of his words echoed in her mind like a constant drumbeat, threatening to drown out everything else. The price of truth, his voice lingered in her thoughts, each word seeping deeper into her subconscious. What had she really gotten herself into? The cold light of morning did little to alleviate her unease. Clara paced back and forth in her small apartment, the sound of her footsteps, a rhythmic reminder of how close she was to the edge. Her phone had been eerily silent since the meeting, and yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something was looming on the horizon. As if on cue, her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a text from Raphael, the former detective who had become her reluctant ally in this investigation. "Meet me, now. It's urgent." Clara didn't hesitate. The urgency in his message spoke volumes, and she knew better than to ignore it. Within minutes, she was on her way to the small, inconspicuous diner where they had met previously. Her mind raced with possibilities. What new information did Raphael have? Or was this simply another warning that things were spiraling out of control? She arrived to find the diner nearly empty, the morning crowd still a distant thought. Raphael sat in their usual booth, his face tense, a far cry from the man who had once been calm and collected. As soon as Clara slid into the seat across from him, he didn't waste time. "It's worse than we thought," Raphael muttered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the neon lights. "Marquez isn't just playing games. He's making moves, and I think he's already set the wheels in motion to take you out." Clara's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, take me out?" she asked, leaning forward, her eyes scanning his face for any sign of exaggeration. "The files you uncovered, someone is already after them," he said, his gaze shifting nervously to the door. "I've been talking to some of my old contacts. The Faraz family is pushing back harder than we realized. They're pulling strings behind the scenes, trying to make sure nothing gets out." Clara's stomach twisted. She had suspected that the Faraz family wouldn't just sit back and let her dig into their dirty secrets, but hearing it from Raphael confirmed her worst fears. She was becoming a target. "And Marquez?" she asked, her voice tight. Raphael shook his head, a dark look crossing his features. "He's dangerous, Clara. I've been tracking his movements. He's got eyes on you, watching everything you do. But what scares me more is that I think he's been working with someone else, someone with far More reach than he has. Clara swallowed. Who? Someone high up, Raphael replied, leaning in closer. A politician. Someone with influence. I don't know exactly who, but I've heard rumors. People who've gone too deep into the Faraz family's business. They disappear. Quietly. Discreetly. Clara's mind whirled as the weight of the situation settled on her shoulders. She had always known this job was dangerous, but this was different. There were too many people involved, too many lives at stake, and she was right in the middle of it all. We need to figure out who's pulling the strings, Clara said, her voice steady despite the growing fear inside her. If we can expose them, we can bring the whole operation down. Raphael nodded but didn't look convinced. You're playing with fire, Clara. This isn't just about the Faraz family anymore. It's bigger than that. There are people in power who don't want this getting out, and they'll stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. Clara knew. The truth was out there, hidden beneath layers of lies and corruption. But as much as she hated to admit it, Raphael was right. This was no longer just about uncovering the truth. It was about survival. The days blurred together in a haze of sleepless nights and frantic investigation. Clara found herself working in overdrive, digging through the remaining files, trying to make sense of the connections between the Faraz family, Marquez, and the nameless politician Raphael had alluded to. But the more she uncovered, the more elusive the truth became. Every lead seemed to spiral into another dead end. One evening, as Clara pored over documents in her apartment, her phone buzzed again. It was an encrypted message from an anonymous source. You're close. Don't trust anyone, not even Raphael. Clara's breath caught in her throat. The warning sent a chill through her body. But what unsettled her even more was the implication. Raphael? Could he be involved in this? Was she being played? For a moment, Clara froze, her thoughts racing. The very idea that Raphael, someone she had come to trust, could be part of this twisted game seemed impossible. But as the doubt settled into her mind, she couldn't ignore the possibility. She needed to be careful. She couldn't afford to trust anyone blindly. The next day, Clara met with Raphael at a more secluded location, an abandoned park near the outskirts of the city, a place where they could speak without fear of being overheard. Clara felt the weight of the anonymous message hanging over her as she walked toward him. Clara, Raphael greeted her with a nod, though his eyes held a glint of worry. We need to move fast. I've uncovered some things and it's bad, really bad. Clara didn't respond immediately. Instead, she studied him carefully, searching for any sign of deception. The gnawing feeling in her gut refused to go away, and she wondered if she could trust him, or if this was all part of some elaborate trap. Bad how? She finally asked, her voice steady, but with a layer of suspicion beneath it. The family, Raphael began, lowering his voice. They've been funneling money into a shell corporation. I think it's connected to human trafficking. And worse, the politician I mentioned. I've been hearing whispers of a deal, something to do with a public scandal that could ruin the Faraz name. They're desperate to keep it quiet, Clara. Clara felt her pulse quicken. The magnitude of what Raphael was saying hit her like a ton of bricks. The Faraz family wasn't just corrupt. They were involved in something far more sinister. She had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went, but she was getting closer to something dark and dangerous. But as Raphael spoke, Clara's mind kept drifting back to the message. Don't trust anyone, not even Raphael. She shook it off. It had to be a bluff, didn't it? As Clara turned the corner to leave, she saw something that made her heart stop. A figure standing at the edge of the park, hidden in the shadows. Her breath caught as the figure stepped forward, revealing the unmistakable face of Victor Marquez. Clara, he said, his voice smooth and deadly. I warned you, didn't I? Clara's heart raced as Victor Marquez stepped out of the shadows, his presence imposing, as if the very air around him had shifted in his favor. For a split second, she considered running, but something deep inside her, the same instinct that had driven her through years of investigative work, kept her grounded. She wasn't about to back down now. Victor's lips curled into a smile, but it was cold, calculating. Clara, always so determined, he said, his tone mocking. But there's a limit to how far you can push before things start to break, don't you think? Clara stood her ground, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. There was something different in his demeanor tonight, an intensity that felt almost personal. But why? What did he want from her now? You know, I never thought I'd be standing here with you, Victor, she replied, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. But here we are. Victor took a slow step closer, the sound of his polished shoes crunching on the gravel underfoot. He didn't say anything for a moment, just studied her with an unreadable expression. It was as if he was weighing her, deciding how much of the truth she could handle, or perhaps how much of it he was willing to give. "You think you can expose us," he said finally, his voice low and deliberate. "But what you're missing is that this game isn't just about exposing the truth, Clara. It's about control, and you're not in control." Clara's breath caught in her chest. It was as if he had read her thoughts. She had suspected that Victor wasn't just a player in this high-stakes game. He was the architect. But hearing it from him, hearing the chilling certainty in his voice, made it all too real. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, trying to muster the strength she was beginning to lose. "You can try to intimidate me, Victor, but I won't stop. I'll bring everything to light." Victor's smile widened, though it lacked warmth. "Oh, Clara," he said, almost with pity. "You think you're the first person to think they could bring me down? The first to believe they could uncover the family's secrets and walk away unscathed? You're nothing but a pawn, caught up in a game you don't fully understand." A chill ran down Clara's spine. Pawn. That word haunted her. Was it true? Was she just a piece, being moved around by forces far more powerful than she could ever hope to control? "You've underestimated me," she shot back, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "I've been digging into your family's business, Victor, and I won't stop until I've exposed everything." Victor studied her with a cold gaze, his lips curling again, though this time it wasn't amusement that flickered in his eyes. It was something darker, more dangerous. He didn't need to speak for Clara to know what he was thinking. He knew something she didn't, and that thought gnawed at her, making her feel more vulnerable than ever. "You think you're the only one digging, Clara?" Victor asked, taking another step forward. "You think the Farah's family hasn't been preparing for this day? We've known about you for a long time. Every step you've taken, every move you've made. We've been watching." Clara's blood ran cold. They'd been watching her? "Why are you telling me this?" Clara asked, though the question felt almost redundant. It was clear now that Victor was playing some sort of game, and she had yet to figure out the rules. Victor took a long breath, as if savoring the moment. "Because I want you to understand something, Clara. You're a part of something much bigger than yourself now, and the more you dig, the more you'll realize that you don't have the luxury of turning back. The truth you're chasing isn't something you can handle, not without paying a price." Clara swallowed hard. She was at a crossroads. She could back away, let the darkness consume her, or she could push forward, despite the cost. The thought of giving up didn't sit well with her. She had come too far. She had seen too much to just walk away now. "What is it you want from me, Victor?" Clara asked, her voice shaking only slightly. Victor paused. "I want you to make a choice, Clara. The files you've been digging through, destroy them. Walk away. Leave this all behind, and I'll make sure you're taken care of. You'll be safe. You can walk away with everything you've ever wanted." Clara felt a flicker of disbelief. "You think I'd just walk away?" she said, shaking her head. "You really think I'm the kind of person who would let something like this go?" Victor's gaze softened, as if seeing her for the first time, his smile fading into something more genuine, but no less dangerous. "I don't think you will, but I wanted you to know that you could. You still have a choice, Clara, a choice to walk away before you lose everything." The air between them thickened, the silence pressing down on Clara's chest. She was at a precipice. One wrong move, and it could all come crashing down. Victor didn't wait for her answer. Without another word, he turned and began to walk away, disappearing into the shadows. "Think about it," he called back, his voice fading into the night. "But know this, you're running out of time." Clara stood still, frozen by the weight of his words. Run out of time. What did that mean? Was it a threat, or was there more to it? She couldn't tell, but one thing was certain. Victor Marquez wasn't just playing games. He was making his move, and if she wasn't careful, she'd be the one who paid the price. The question now was, could she survive the game long enough to expose the truth? Clara sat motionless, her gaze fixed on the spot where Victor had disappeared into the night. His words echoed in her mind like a broken record, each repetition pulling her deeper into a web of uncertainty. Walk away, destroy the files, live in peace. The temptation to take the easy route was there. She could walk away, drop the investigation, and find a way to start fresh. No one would ever know the truth, but that thought was fleeting. The moment she'd set foot on this path, there was no going back. She had seen too much. She had learned too much. Clara wasn't the kind of person who could live with herself, knowing she had abandoned the truth for the sake of safety. Not now. The question was, could she survive this game? Clara's phone buzzed on the table, jolting her from her thoughts. She picked it up, and her heart skipped a beat when she saw the message. It was from Raphael. "I need to see you. It's urgent." A sense of dread washed over her. She hadn't heard from Raphael in days. Too many days. Was he in danger? Or worse, had he become a part of the system that had already begun to close in around her? The cryptic nature of his message made her heart race with apprehension. She didn't have the luxury of second-guessing herself anymore. Without wasting another moment, Clara grabbed her coat and headed out the door, her mind a blur of possibilities. The streets felt colder tonight, as if the world had grown more hostile in the hours since her encounter with Victor. Raphael's choice of location was deliberate, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, far from the prying eyes of those who might be watching. Clara arrived in less than 30 minutes, her nerves on edge as she stepped out of the car. The place was as eerie as it was desolate, the warehouse looming in front of her like a silent sentinel of secrets. The dim light from a nearby street lamp flickered, casting long, unsettling shadows across the cracked pavement. As Clara approached the entrance, her pulse quickened. Every instinct told her to be cautious, to tread carefully, but there was no turning back now. She stepped inside. The inside of the warehouse was cold and barren, the faint smell of rust and mildew hanging in the air. A single light bulb illuminated the center of the room, and there, standing in the shadows, was Raphael. His face was drawn, his usually confident demeanor replaced by something more guarded. Clara's stomach churned at the sight of him. "Clara," he said, his voice tight, his eyes darting around as if expecting someone to jump out at any moment. "We need to move fast." "What's going on, Raphael?" Clara asked, her voice steady, but the unease in her chest was, growing. "What do you know?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "The Faraz family knows you're digging, but it's worse than we thought. They're moving assets, shifting things behind the scenes, and they've already set their sights on you." Clara's heart sank. She had known things were bad, but hearing it from Raphael, someone who had been in this world of corruption and crime, made it feel all too real. "What do you mean they've set their sights on me?" "They've got eyes on you, Clara," Raphael said, his tone grave. "It's not just about the family's secrets anymore. They want you out of the picture, permanently." Clara's mind raced. Permanently. The word hung in the air, heavy with implications. She had thought she was just a journalist trying to uncover the truth, but now it seemed that she was a pawn in a much larger game. She wasn't just digging for a story, she was threatening an empire, and empires didn't fall easily. "I've been doing some digging of my own," Raphael continued, "and I think I've figured out who's behind it all. The person who's been pulling the strings from the shadows." Clara's heart skipped a beat. Could it be who she thought it was? She had suspected someone was orchestrating everything, but hearing Raphael confirm it made her stomach churn. "Who?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Raphael hesitated before answering. "Victor Marquez." Clara's breath caught in her throat. She had suspected that Marquez was more involved than he let on, but this revelation sent a shiver down her spine. Victor, the man she had faced just days ago, was the mastermind behind everything. The thought seemed almost impossible. "Are you sure?" Clara asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. "Positive," Raphael said, his face grim. "Victor's been using his connections to manipulate everything behind the scenes. The family trusts him. Too much. They think he's loyal, but I've been tracking his movements, and I've found something that could bring him down. I just need you to trust me." Clara swallowed hard. Trust Raphael? The very man who had warned her about the dangers of digging too deep? The man who had been watching her every move? But now, as his words sank in, Clara realized that he wasn't just a bystander in this twisted game. He was caught up in it, just like she was. And if she was going to survive, she had no choice but to trust him. "I'm listening," Clara said, her voice low. "I've found evidence, proof of a hidden transaction. It's tied to a secret offshore account," Raphael explained. "If we expose it, it'll ruin everything Victor's worked for. But we need to move fast. If we don't, he'll make sure we disappear." Clara's heart raced. This was it, the breaking point. Everything she had worked for, every lead she had chased, had led her here. She could almost see the end game in her mind, but she knew the closer she got to the truth, the more dangerous it became. "We have to be careful," Clara said, her mind working through the implications. "Victor's not just a businessman. He's connected to people in power. This could get much worse before it gets better." Raphael nodded. "I know, but it's the only shot we've got." Clara stood there, caught in the tension of the moment, the weight of the decision pressing on her chest. Every instinct screamed at her to back away, to walk away from the danger. But deep down, she knew that if she did, the truth would remain buried forever, and the lives lost in the process would have been for nothing. "I'm in," Clara said, her voice steady. "Let's bring him down." The night felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. Clara walked through the abandoned warehouse, the echoes of her footsteps bouncing off the cold, concrete walls. Raphael was right beside her, his expression unreadable, as if the weight of their mission had already begun to settle over him. They had agreed on a plan, but there was an underlying tension in the air, an unspoken realization that no matter how carefully they planned, the odds were stacked against them. "I've got a contact who can help us access the account," Raphael murmured, breaking the silence. "But it's not going to be easy. The moment we make a move, it'll trigger alarms. The people we're up against, Victor included, they have eyes everywhere." Clara nodded, her mind focused. She had faced dangerous situations before, but this felt different. The stakes were higher than anything she'd ever encountered. It wasn't just her career on the line now. It was her life, the lives of those she cared about. Everything she had fought for was hanging by a thread. "How long do we have before they figure it out?" Clara asked, her voice low. Raphael hesitated for a moment, his brow furrowed in thought. "Not long. Maybe a day, maybe two. Once the transaction is accessed, they'll know. And Victor's already on edge. If he figures out we're onto him, things could get messy." Clara's heart raced. The thought of facing Victor again, knowing he was actively hunting her, was terrifying. But she pushed the fear aside. This was her chance to expose him for what he truly was. A manipulator, a puppet master, hiding in plain sight. She couldn't let him get away with it. Not after everything he'd taken from her. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady but edged with resolve. "We do this now." Raphael nodded, a fleeting look of approval passing across his face before he led her to a small, inconspicuous laptop resting on an old wooden table in the middle of the room. The device looked out of place in the otherwise dilapidated warehouse, a symbol of their last hope to uncover the truth. Clara sat down, the cold metal of the chair pressing into her skin, her fingers brushing over the keys as she powered up the laptop. The screen flickered to life, revealing an encrypted interface. She exchanged a glance with Raphael, whose face was shadowed by doubt but also determination. It was clear to her now that this wasn't just about exposing Victor. It was about taking down everything he had built, a corrupt system that would stop at nothing to protect its own. Raphael handed her a small external drive. "This is the key to getting in," he said. "We have one shot at this. No mistakes." Clara inserted the drive into the laptop and began typing in the code Raphael had given her. As she did, a chill swept over her, as if the very room was holding its breath. The tension was unbearable. With every keystroke, she could feel the weight of the consequences pressing harder against her chest. Seconds felt like hours as the encryption began to break. Finally, with a soft beep, the system unlocked. Clara's eyes scanned the screen, her heart pounding in her chest as she navigated through the files. It was all there, the hidden accounts, the off-the-books transactions, the names of people who had been paid to keep their mouths shut. "Found it," Clara whispered, her fingers trembling She scrolled through the financial records. She could see the pattern clearly now. Victor's manipulations, the shady dealings that had funded his empire. He had built his fortune on lies and deceit, hiding behind a mask of power and influence. But then, something caught her eye. A name she hadn't expected to see. It was buried deep within the files, linked to a recent transfer, Clara Duarte. Her breath caught in her throat. She quickly clicked on the entry, her mind racing. How could this be? Had she been dragged into this web of corruption without even knowing it? Was she part of a bigger game than she'd ever realized? Before she could delve deeper, Raphael's voice broke through her thoughts. "Clara, we need to move. They're going to find us soon." Clara's mind was spinning. She couldn't afford to dwell on the implications of what she had just seen. Not now, not when everything was about to fall apart. She quickly copied the relevant files to a secure folder and began shutting down the laptop. "Let's go," she said, standing up and grabbing the drive. But as she turned to leave, a loud crash echoed through the warehouse, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching. Clara's heart stopped. It was too late. "They found us," Raphael muttered, his face turning pale as he grabbed her arm. "We need to run. Now." They bolted for the exit, but before they could reach the door, a group of men stepped into the dim light of the warehouse. Their faces were masked, their eyes cold and calculating. Victor's men. Raphael shoved Clara forward, his voice urgent. "Go! Get to the car. I'll hold them off." Clara hesitated, but Raphael's stern gaze left no room for argument. He knew what was at stake. They both did. She turned and ran, her heart pounding in her ears. The sound of footsteps behind her grew louder, the men closing in. She had no idea how far they'd gone, how much time they had left. All she knew was that there was no turning back now. She burst through the exit, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she ran toward the street. Her car was parked just a few yards away, the headlights casting a pale glow in the night. Clara reached the car and fumbled with her keys, the cold metal slick in her hands. She could hear the men behind her, shouting, but she didn't stop. She couldn't afford to. With one final push, she threw herself into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut. Her hands gripped the wheel, her mind racing as she started the engine. The car lurched forward, tires screeching as she sped away from the warehouse, the sound of pursuit fading in the distance. Clara didn't know where she was going. She just knew she had to get out. She couldn't stop now, not when she was so close to exposing the truth. But with every mile that passed, the reality of what she had uncovered settled deeper into her bones. She wasn't just in danger. She was the target, and there was no going back. The city blurred past Clara as she drove, the neon lights flashing in her peripheral vision like distorted ghosts. Her hands tightened around the steering wheel, knuckles white against the leather, but the cold sweat on her brow was a result of something far deeper than the chill of the night air. Her mind raced through 1,000 thoughts, each one more terrifying than the last. Raphael had been left behind at the warehouse. She had seen the way he'd looked at her before she fled, determined yet full of resignation. He hadn't given her a chance to save him. Now it was just her, alone. Clara barely registered the intersection ahead as she made a sharp turn, her tires screeching against the wet pavement. Every fiber of her being screamed for her to stop, to take a breath, but there was no time for that. The shadow of Victor loomed over her, and the file she carried was the only thing standing between her and the abyss. She couldn't back down now, not when everything she had fought for had led her here. Her phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up with a message from an unknown number. Clara's heart skipped a beat. Could it be Raphael? She reached for the device, her eyes flicking between the road and the screen. The message was short. You have no idea what you're up against. It's not just Victor. Watch your back. Trust no one. Clara's breath hitched. It wasn't Raphael. The message sent a jolt of panic through her chest. The cryptic warning had only deepened the pit in her stomach. Who could this be? Was it another, Allie? Or was it someone playing her, trying to mislead her just when she was about to cross the line? Trust no one. The words echoed in her mind as she made a sharp turn, heading toward the only place she could think of for refuge. The old townhouse her parents had left her after their passing. It was secluded, hidden in a quiet part of the city where no one would expect her to go. But the closer she got, the more the reality of the situation began to settle in. She wasn't just running from Victor anymore. She was running from everyone, from every person she thought she could trust. Clara parked the car in front of the townhouse, her fingers still gripping the keys, unwilling to let go of the feeling of control. But it was a lie. She had no control. Not anymore. She could feel the walls closing in, and the truth that had been slowly unfurling in her mind was now a damning reality. She grabbed the flash drive and hurried up the stairs, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. As she reached for the door to her parents' old study, she stopped. Something felt off. The air around her was too still, too quiet, and then she heard it. The soft, almost imperceptible sound of a door creaking open behind her. Clara spun around just as a figure stepped into the dim light. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized the silhouette. "Victor," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He stood in the doorway, his expression dark and unreadable. There was no hint of the charming, calculating man she had first met in the hotel lobby. He was no longer the suave businessman. He was a predator, and she was his prey. "You didn't think you could run forever, did you, Clara?" His voice was low, almost soothing, as if the confrontation had been inevitable. "You think you've won? You think exposing me will change anything?" Clara's pulse quickened, but she held her ground. She knew she couldn't back down now, not when she was so close to the truth. "I'm not running from you anymore, Victor. I'm exposing everything." Victor stepped further into the room, his presence filling the space like a shadow. "You think you've found the truth, but the truth, Clara, is far more complicated than you could ever imagine. There are powers at play that go beyond your wildest comprehension." Clara's mind was racing. What was he trying to say? Was he admitting that there were forces even he couldn't control? That someone else was pulling the strings? "I'm not afraid of you," Clara said, her voice firm, though her insides were screaming. She could feel the cold sweat on her back, the hairs on her neck standing up. "I have the proof. People will know what you've done." Victor smirked, an unsettling grin that sent chills down her spine. "Oh, you poor thing," he murmured, almost as if pitying her. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. You think this is about the Faraz fortune, about power. You have no clue how deep this runs. You're just a small part of a much bigger plan, Clara. A pawn in a game that's already been won." Clara took a step back, her breath quickening. "A pawn? You were never meant to uncover this," Victor continued, his voice colder now, like a whisper from the grave. "The moment you stepped into this world, you were marked, and now you'll pay the price for your curiosity." Clara's mind was spinning. Had she been wrong about everything? Had she miscalculated? No, she couldn't let herself believe that. She couldn't. "What do you want?" "From me, Victor?" she demanded, her voice strong but quivering with the weight of her fear. Victor's eyes flashed, and for the first time, Clara saw something that made her skin crawl, a flicker of genuine malice. "I want nothing from you," he said, almost casually. "But I'm afraid it's too late for you, Clara. You're already in too deep." He took a step forward, and for a moment Clara thought she might collapse under the intensity of his gaze. His eyes weren't filled with rage. No, they were calculating, cold, empty. And then he spoke, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "And you've already lost." In a flash, everything changed. Clara felt a sharp pain in her side, a pressure that made her gasp for air. Her hand flew to her waist, and when she pulled it away, blood stained her fingers. Her vision blurred as the world tilted, and for a moment, everything seemed to slow down. Victor's laugh echoed through the room, distant and hollow, as she crumpled to the floor. She had been so close.